Hey everyone, welcome to week 57. Today is day 3, Wednesday. This is our third day of our ongoing space before figure. And remember, what we're trying to do is explore how the relationship between figure and space is sort of reconfigured if our focal point, which was usually the figure, starts becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. So let's see how we do today.
Okay, let's get started. This is going to be day 3. This is our third day of space before figure. Now, here's the weird part about this title. When I thought of this week's theme, I was pretty sure that I wanted to emphasize the weight that I was going to be able to put on space, on the idea of space, as opposed to the hierarchy that I always seem to grant the figures in my paintings. I've always considered myself a figure painter. I've always thought that my strengths lie in the representation of figures. And even though I've had plenty of wonderful experiences painting objects and painting spaces, I think that where I was going to say shine the most, but it's not about the way I present myself to other people. No, but I think that where I feel happiest and where I'm most comfortable when painting is when I can, like I said on Monday, tackle the humanity behind that figure that is in front of me. So it wasn't really about exchanging hierarchies. It wasn't about taking the spaces that functioned as backgrounds in my earlier paintings and bringing them forward and saying, okay, you've been playing second fiddle in these paintings. Now I want you to be the protagonist of my painting. For some reason, I kind of imagined that that was going to organically happen in my painting, that I would just trade off the energy that I would put into the figure and almost like deposit it in the space. So I was going to paint these beautiful spaces and they were going to be inhabited by these figures. These very powerful spaces were going to be activated by figures that were going to be occupying them. That's what I thought was going to happen because I thought in very binary terms. You know, and my brain was like, okay, if I take away some of the natural inclination that I have when I paint the figure and I put it into the other elements, to put it simply, almost like if I put it in the things that are not the figure, then whatever those elements were, you know, those elements that were not the figure, were going to be heightened simply by my attention to them. So I was going to put most of my efforts in trying to paint those things. And again, in my mind, the paintings were going to become about those things instead of being about, you know, what I was used to my painting referring to, which was the figure. And I've been a little surprised by what's been happening. And I think today's painting specifically is quite eye-opening. But let's take a step back and let's reflect upon what has been the making of these first two paintings. So on Monday's painting, I think I did something that was very simple. Honestly, it was just very instinctual, and it's almost like a reactionary painting. It's where I'm telling myself, I'm not supposed to put all my energy and, you know, all the weight into this figure, into this portrait. So what is the most basic thing I can do? I could just cover it up. I can kind of edit it out. It's very easy. It's almost like playing with the expectation of wanting to see a portrait, of wanting to see this apparent protagonist of the painting, and then just blocking our view. You know, we as observers, we want to be able to go past this vase and these sunflowers, but they're actually blocking us from what we think is supposed to be the most important element in our painting, which is going to be the figure. Figures do that naturally. It's not like I'm doing anything special. It's just that us as human beings, as soon as we see ourselves reflected in any media, it could be, you know, in the big screen in a movie, it could be in a photograph, it could be in an internet video, it could be in a painting, it could be in a drawing, it could be in a sculpture. We just naturally feel that it is about us, that this image or this object that we are contemplating, that we're observing, is reflecting something about us. So we're always going to look for those moments in those works of art where we can say, okay, I identify myself as a human being with this character in this, you know, in our case, painting, and I'm going to give that character the attention it deserves. So I thought I would play a little bit with that, and I thought that the shapes of this vase and this sunflower that I had been painting, the week prior, were just perfect elements to provide me with that obstacle. It was almost like this beautiful obstacle. And because it was an obstacle, it almost made you understand that you couldn't access those things that you were expecting. And if you couldn't access those things, then you had no other alternative than to just kind of dance around the picture, to travel around the picture. You know, you're fishing in this picture trying to find something that may grab your attention. And I was hoping that if you go into that fishing expedition through the painting, you realize that you are just traversing this hopefully really nice space and this nice atmosphere that is surrounding these elements that you thought were supposed to be hierarchical. In the end, what you want is that the viewer at some point says, well, this is like a nice scenic route. I've been traveling around the apparent subject matter, but at some point, I'm just not yearning to uncover this figure. I'm going to be pretty happy just circling around what at first I thought was going to be the focal point of the painting. So I thought Monday's painting was a really nice way of saying, okay, the hierarchies are going to be shifted. This is an exercise where almost immediately we accept that what has worked before is not going to work anymore. And it was important for me on Tuesday to do two things. The first one was to follow the rules that we had set out for ourselves on Monday. So Danny, because this week is going to be about Danny in space. So the first one was that I respected and honored the fact that I had to try and make Danny a little bit smaller than the day before. So her dimensions are going to be a little bit smaller in the picture plane. I'm going to try to do that, and I'm going to try just to make the space feel bigger around the figure every single time. So you guys have my word that this is something that I'm going to try to do. There's no sense in cheating myself because, you know, if I cheat, I'm only just lying to myself, and, you know, the exercise just doesn't make any sense. So I was going to try to make Danny a little bit smaller in our picture plane, and I was going to see if I could double down on the fact that while Danny is going to be a very important element in the painting, it's not about the recognizing of Danny. It's not about us being able to find Danny and to say, okay, I finally recognize the protagonist of the painting. Danny is going to be there almost as a way to evidence the relationships that that figure has with the space that is surrounding her. So for me, it was important to realize that on Monday, we found a beautiful way to create an obstacle, this wall that didn't let us approach this figure. So I wanted to keep some of those elements going. But like I said yesterday on Spanish Tuesdays, it was also very important for me that the painting could be a little more democratic in the sense that I had to find devices that would help me establish the figure as being not really relevant in the picture plane. So what happened in this painting? Danny is grabbing these two white bags, and the lightness of those bags suddenly makes them very important. In terms of value, they become relevant to the picture. Your eye is going to go towards them very, very quickly. So now it wasn't just about the figure, it was about the figure holding these two light values that are immediately going to compete with Danny. So Danny wasn't just a figure that was holding two objects. Danny was almost like split into three rhythms. It was the bag that she was holding with her right hand, then it was her body, and then it was the bag that she was holding with her left hand. That was the rhythm. It was boom, boom, boom. But those three beats made up the wholeness of the figure. So now suddenly this figure that has become three separate instances melded into one is part of a bigger space that's also inhabited by the bigger mass in this space, which is the cardboard box. This big, really nice, earthy cardboard box that suddenly puts the way we reflect upon dimensions in motion. You know, we're trying to figure out what sort of relationships are there in terms of how big or small the things are in our picture plane. And that big cardboard box is just a perfect way to set out these rules that we start to accept, but also feel a little weird because suddenly we are used to our figure being important. But now there's this box, you know, and we usually don't consider boxes to be really big, but this is a big cardboard box. So suddenly we have this big box, in terms of size at least, one of the most important elements in the painting, but we also see a figure, and a figure that is caught in mid-act. You know, she's holding these bags. There is an action taking place, or at least the result of an action, you know, her holding the bags or her carrying the bags. So there's a ton of things that are going on, but I think that there's so much kind of interesting noise going on, that we're starting to be aware of all of these things taking place at the same time. Now, along with that, there is a sense of space, of place. The things that are going on are also taking place in our living room, and that living room has a very specific lighting condition. So these beats and these differences in dimensions and in sizes are accompanied by the sense of space and sense of light. And when you put all of those things together, it's like the sum of all those parts is actually greater than any one of those single moments that is in the picture plane. And I thought that that was very, very nice. So what happened on Monday was that I realized that I could block my center of interest and not really replace it, but make you want to see if you could uncover that moment. And in that willingness to uncover that figure that was behind, you would travel through the painting, discovering like all these other shapes that were super exciting. And then I realized that I could just fill the picture plane. I mean, it's not like a maximalist painting. I'm not doing a space replete with, a myriad of different elements and shapes that becomes like a visual cacophony. No. These are pretty much just vertical beats. Some of them are wider, some of them are more narrow, and that's about it. I realized that I could help the viewer travel through this painting if they were willing to traverse those beats. And that was super cool. But for today, I realized that the lesson didn't necessarily have to follow some of those rule sets that I had established for the first 2 days. And I think today is going to be a very important painting. And I'm going to try to verbalize why I think it's important. With the past 2 paintings, along with what I instinctually thought my week was going to be about, where I was saying that the space is going to become the protagonist. Like the space is going to carry all the weight that was left behind when I decided that the figure was not going to be as relevant. That's what I thought was going to naturally happen with these paintings. Now, with today's painting, I did something that was a little weird, I think, but that it felt natural. I wanted to paint a very top-heavy painting. So a lot of the elements that are of relevance in the painting are going to inhabit this area of the painting that is going to occupy the upper 10-15% of the painting. That's where all the action is going to happen. But here's the weird thing. Those apparently exciting moments, and I'm going to say apparently, are made up of moments that are going to have some contrast in terms of value and that are going to be broken into smaller shapes. And in this case, I was going to paint this yellow raincoat, this small yellow jacket/raincoat that Danny has. And this raincoat is something that I would love to paint. I told myself, oh yeah, I'm going to replace the attention that I usually give to the figure, and I'm going to paint the crap out of that raincoat. I'm going to make it super, super attractive. And then I thought, well, wait a minute. That's not the exercise. You would be cheating if you try to do that, because in essence, painting that raincoat would also speak a lot about the figure. It's almost like you're replacing the identity of the figure and you're sort of transplanting it to the raincoat. So I told myself, no, that's not going to work out. I have to just simply enunciate the raincoat and liberate myself from that urge to have that focal point that belongs to an extension of the figure. So I was like, okay, I can't just put all my energy into this. And my instinct kind of took over and said, okay, but we need to find another focal point. We need to make something else interesting. And then I told myself, well, what if we don't do that? What if today's painting is just a vertical crescendo of elements? Those elements don't have to be anything. They can be bits of light. They could be bits of dark. They could be a yellow mask that symbolizes that raincoat. They could be just this face that is kind of sunken in this very gray, muted color. And what if that idea that they don't have to be anything is also echoed in the bottom, in that big mass that's the bottom of the painting? That mass that's actually holding all that relevant stuff that's up there. What if that big mass in the bottom is also nothing? So in essence, what if I paint nothing in the bottom? And what if I liberate myself from the obligation to paint something of interest in that upper part? So this is super weird for me because the bottom part of the painting would just be this open space. And the upper part of the painting would be this space that was occupied by a lot of different elements, but none of them was going to have hierarchy over the others. What happens to the image if you do that? What if you say, I'm not going to ground the painting in the bottom, and I'm not going to emphasize anything up top? That's such a weird painting to paint, because you start thinking, well, your painting's going to be about nothing. If you have nothing up top to play against nothing in the bottom, then there are no relationships. Then it's just this kind of monotone humming of a painting that just kind of travels slowly and then it dissipates. And I was like, well, what if the painting is that? What's wrong with doing that? Because I've always believed that intent can actually bend a painting. Intent can take something that would seemingly not work and make it work. This willingness to say something, even if that something is the nothingness between these two relationships, can actually make this painting work. Or work? Question mark. And I thought it did. I had to fight my impulses a lot, because my impulses would say, you have to ground this painting somewhere. You have to land this painting somewhere. Just paint the crap out of the floor, for example. Just give me some reflections. Give me some perspective lines where I can kind of tell the character of the flooring. Give me something. Give me a little moment that can grab my interest, and it's going to whet my appetite. But don't give me this lull of a painting where there's almost nothing in the bottom, and you're just traveling up top, waiting to be wowed, and suddenly there's nothing up top. So how can nothing balance nothing? And I think I loved it, because again, it wasn't about those things. It wasn't about making a picture work. You know how I've been telling you guys that I'm trying to liberate myself from picture making. And I think today was one of those moments where every bit of instinct that I had was dictated by picture making. I was trying to answer to all the things that I do that I think will make a better picture. What is going to make this painting exciting and worth looking? And I had to fight those, and I had to say, well, maybe the painting is not about those things. Maybe I can make a painting exercise that doesn't have to obey those picture-making rules. And I think today was a step in that direction. It was so cool. It was so weird to just let myself say, it's done. It's done because it's actually exploring what I set out to do. This is about contemplating the relinquishing of power that the figures have in my painting, but it's not about the transferring of that power to the space. It's not. I don't want to say that there has to be hierarchy in a painting and just give it to another moment of the painting, because then the equation would be easily solved. All I had to do was to say, well, the paintings are about space, and that's it, period. But what's happening is something I think a lot cooler, and I guess it's about identifying the character that all the elements that surround the figure would have, but not when they become the center of interest, but when they are presented as what they are, plain as simply as what they are. So wow, that's actually super cool. And I think this is one of the first paintings I've ever done, and I know this sounds like exaggerated, but I know myself and I trust myself when I say these things and when I feel these things. This is a painting about nothing. There's a bunch of nothingness in this painting, and it's absolutely wonderful. Saying that a year ago would have made me think that is a completely inefficient painting. That's a bad painting. Because if you paint something where you're not exhibiting hierarchies and where you're not telling the viewer what they're supposed to look at, then that painting is never going to work. But I think in this context, this painting works, and it works perfectly. And I know it sounds weird, but I thought this was a very tiny but super important experience for me to have. I'm really excited to see what's going to happen tomorrow. And I have no idea how I'm going to be able to digest what happened today, but I guess that's the exciting part about this project. So that's going to be it for today. Again, super cool experience today. I loved this Seinfeld of a painting, and I'll see you guys tomorrow where we'll try to see, what happens. I was going to say to see how we can follow up this painting, this experience, but we don't need to. There's no pressure. I don't need to have like an eye-opening experience tomorrow. No, I just have to be able to paint another honest painting. And if I'm able to do that, then the painting is going to be absolutely worth it. So thank you guys for hanging out. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye. Seinfeld of a painting. That's actually pretty good. But I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.